Who belongs on the 49ers Mount Rushmore? And is it easy as it seems on the surface? What current players could potentially get there? And what would have to happen in that case? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is what we do. Thanks for hanging out with us. Love all the everydayers out there. If you're new to the program, welcome. Please subscribe on YouTube. It helps us out tremendously. Gets us in the algo. So subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. If you already subbed up, hit the thumbs up. Let us know you stopped by today. Drop a comment, a topic for a future episode here as we go through the summer, get ready for 2025 training camp. And a fun topic today. We've been tasked for a few things this summer by the Locked On Podcast Network, Croc. And last week we did our submissions for this year's top 100, which we need to vote on for, I think, very soon. And we're going to drop the NFL top 100 according to the Locked On Podcast Network as voted on by all the hosts coming up here in a few weeks. And so that'll be fun. We'll see how many 49ers make that list. And we broke down our top 10 San Francisco 49ers players currently for 2025 here on the show. Today we are tasked with coming up with the 49ers Mount Rushmore. And Croc, I think generationally, if there are older fans than us, they might see it one way. If there are younger fans than us, maybe they would see things a little bit differently. And on the surface, I think it's pretty easy to know who has to be on it. And separately, we came up with our own Mount Rushmores, Croc. And it turns out they were identical, the same identical four players. And the only thing that could change for me versus how I felt the 49ers Mount Rushmore should be is if there were coaches that were allowed to be on it, because then Bill Walsh would, I think, have to be. But this is a players-only Mount Rushmore. So, Bill Walsh, could Kyle Shanahan potentially be on there at some point? Is Kyle Shanahan Croc already?
George Seifert.
Yeah, he's got a ring. Seifert has a ring. And in fact, he's got two rings. He's got rings as a assistant too. Kyle Shanahan, no rings too, which is, I think, a big thing when you start talking about the current players and stuff. But let's hold off on the current group. And
real quick, that could be a whole nother conversation too, just the coaches, right? Because guys that have helped get rings, like Mike Shanahan, Mike Holmgren, right? There are a lot that contributed to the 49ers getting rings that end up getting jobs in other places.
It's funny. I had an idea for a Father's Day episode, and I just didn't think there was enough content for it. But I was thinking, what's the best father-son tandems in the NFL? And I was like, okay, well, what's the best father-son combination for the 49ers? Is it Mike and Kyle Shanahan? It has to be, right?
Yeah. Easily.
Yeah. I can't even think of any other father-sons that would compete with that. There's been Mike Nolan and Dick Nolan.
Yeah.
But the Shanahans, I would put ahead of them. I don't know. Let us know. Any other father-son tandems in 49ers history that we're blanking on? I'm sure there's more. How about John Lynch and his son, who's now with the 49ers scouting staff, I think, somewhere. But Croc. Oh, Tariq and Terrell Owens. Terrell did a lot of the heavy lifting there. Need Brandon Rice to join the 49ers, and then it's Jerry Rice plus anybody. It's kind of like the is it the Ted Williams and his, is it Ted Williams? I can't remember. Ted Williams and his brother. It's kind of like Barry the Bonds thing, because like Bonds in anybody is has the most home runs. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. But anyway, talking about the
Jerry Rice's son, when I was with the San Jose Sabercats, he tried out during that time. They brought him in on like a 2-day. Yeah. Didn't make it, but wasn't quite his dad.
Yeah. That's tough. But yeah, Jerry plus anybody would instantly be the best tandem ever. So Croc, 49ers Mount Rushmore. To put it simply, we both had the exact same 4 names, but they all come from the same era, and they are all teammates. And it is the quarterbacks, Joe Montana and Steve Young. It is Jerry Rice. And I was hoping your 4th would be a little bit different so we could debate this a little bit more. But our 4th was both Ronnie Lott, the only defensive player. And so we had the exact same 4. And I think it's hard to argue anybody else, but they're all from the same generation. Is that fair? Are we, and I'm going to go through a lot of the names here in past generations, talk about some current 49ers as well. Is it fair to put everybody from the same generation on the 49ers Mount Rushmore?
I think that, and my whole thing was, we have to figure out a different spin on this because it's just way too easy. And I spit out those 4 names, like this is the 49ers Mount Rushmore, and you're like, damn, I was hoping you had a different name on there because it is exactly the same. And I think for most of our fans, it would be the exact same. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, Ronnie Lott, boom, right? So it's like, all right, you either find a different angle where we can make an argument for other guys, or just come up with an alternate Mount Rushmore so that there is some kind of conversation. The crazy thing is those 4, I mean, how many teams, if you just said, all right, we're going to take these 4 and put them on name a different team, and how many of those guys would not be the Mount Rushmore for that team too? Like whatever they did with the 49ers, would they not be the Mount Rushmore? And it's like Jerry Rice would be the Mount Rushmore on every single team. Joe Montana would be on everybody's team. Now, whether, if you put him on the New England Patriots, it would be Brady, Montana. I mean, Brady and then Montana, but like he would be on there.
For sure.
Steve Young might be the only one where on other squads, he might have a tough time. Like, because there's just, he would be the only one, right? Like, but let's say Green Bay Packers, because that's a good one.
Yeah.
Green Bay has they got White. All right, they got Reggie White, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, and Bart Starr.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good group. They've got rings. Montana would go on there somewhere. Rice would go on there somewhere.
Lott would probably, I mean, just what he did, what he was. I mean, so Steve Young might be the only one that's.
I think Lott would
be a little debatable on certain teams.
I don't think Young or Lott would make that one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but I think almost it'd be hard to find a team where Rice would be on every team's, and Montana would be on every team's, because still Montana is ahead of Aaron Rodgers because of, and Rodgers was on a track to be, almost like where Brady ended up going. And he never had that next Super Bowl. And to be honest with you, rings and Super Bowls is a lot of it, especially with the 49ers. We're talking about the era where they won all their championships, right? And that's what's lacking in previous eras, and it's what's lacking in the current era from those guys being even in the conversation, I think, with how easy it was for us to come up with our 49ers Mount Rushmore. And again, like if we could open up to coaches, it would be Bill Walsh that would be on there from the same era, right? And maybe instead of, I guess, Young or Lott, probably instead of Lott, I would say would be the 4th for me. But yeah, so even if you added a bigger Mount Rushmore with 5 or 6, you're still adding more guys from the same era that won all the rings, right?
Yeah, but again, I mean, and deservedly so. Like those guys were terrific. For even guys like me who, I mean, I'm kind of put my age out there with this, but I don't remember seeing a live football game with Joe Montana, which is crazy because I actually played Joe Montana Sports Talk Football. Like I had that on Sega, and I'd play that every day with my brother. But like I can't recall ever in my entire life watching a live game of Joe Montana. But I know what he meant to the 49ers and the NFL. Yeah. And I've obviously went back. I watched, the Super Bowl with him and the Cincinnati Bengals and some of those games and whatnot. Just see, just how he got his nickname Cool Joe, just, under pressure. I mean, heck, if you just took what he was in the last drives like of that game and put that in the 2 Kansas City games and the Ravens game, and like just swapped out whatever the 49ers last drive was in those games, swap it out for like what he did, 49ers would have 3 more Super Bowls.
Yeah, just like close your eyes and like think of, instead of Jimmy Garoppolo dropping back, it's Joe Montana dropping back, and the ball just drops right into Emmanuel Sanders' hands, and he runs into the end zone for a touchdown in the Super Bowl, right? Because that's what it was, and that's the difference in winning or not. And that's why Joe Montana is on the 49ers Mount Rushmore and would be on anybody's Mount Rushmore. Croc, let's talk more about this. Some players that should be mentioned. We could kind of do an era specific, a new era Mount Rushmore, a past era Mount Rushmore, since nobody from any other eras is going to get on our Mount Rushmore. And what would it take for, realistically, a current San Francisco 49er to be considered to knock one of those other guys off of the 49ers Mount Rushmore next? Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Love the Gametime app. I've used it for sporting events. I've used it for concert tickets, and you can too. And if you are a sports fan, or you are somebody that would ever go to a comedy show or a theater event or a concert, you got to have Gametime downloaded, ready to go in your pocket, and a special offer for our listeners as well. And even for playoff games, nothing better than playoff atmosphere, whether it's NBA playoffs, NHL, Major League Baseball playoffs, an NFL 49ers playoff game. Matchups are awesome, and the atmosphere is something that you have to experience live. And prices on the app, even for playoff games and in-demand tickets, drop the closer it gets to the start of that event. Killer last-minute deals, panoramic sea views, and my favorite part, no surprise fees. Gametime is a total game changer. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Are we skipping out on a conversation? Okay, real quick. So what are the prerequisites of being on the 49ers Mount Rushmore? Because there is a player that always comes up and people just don't consider him a 49er, but Deion Sanders. And I get it. It's just the tough thing is the 49ers have such rich history with so many of these players, right? And even the guys, like, there's no 49er fan out there that would put Deion over even a guy like Fred, not Fred Warner, excuse me, but probably Fred Warner too, but Patrick Willis.
Right.
You know, and just what he was to the 49ers. So like Patrick Willis would get on the 49ers Mount Rushmore before prime time. But gosh, what prime was to the 49ers for that 1 year, like having the best year of his career. You know, multiple interceptions in the postseason, defensive player of the year in the entire NFL. He had his best season, 3 returns for touchdowns. Like, he was great. So there's definitely not an argument like to push off. You would have to push off Ronnie Lott, and you just can't. Ronnie Lott had so many amazing seasons for the 49ers.
It's not even a consideration. It's kind of like Larry Allen. Larry Allen was around longer and was an all-time great, but, you know, it just wasn't around. It didn't impact the 49ers organization enough. And Deion Sanders impacted a lot. They won a ring. They won a Super Bowl in that one season. If we were doing singular season Mount Rushmore, so basically the 4 best seasons in 49ers history, I think you would have an argument for, I think you would have to put Deion Sanders in one of those 4 slots. Jerry would obviously be in one of those 4 slots. Some ridiculous.
I still don't think you could.
Just for just the single best season. So it's one season Mount Rushmore. Who had the best single seasons in 49ers history? Deion would be on there. Ronnie Lott would be on there.
Yeah.
I'm not Ronnie Lott. Deion would be on there. Jerry Rice would be on there still.
Ronnie Lott would still be on there. Like, he had double-digit interceptions in the season for the 49ers. 10 picks in 86.
See that? I mean, Frank Gore. What about George Kittle? His 1,300 receiving yards.
Bro, I mean, broke a tight end record.
Yeah. Like, remember when Trent Williams like broke the grading scale at Pro Football Focus because he was so good a few years ago? You know, statistically, it's difficult for an offensive lineman, but is that level of Trent Williams play like Mount Rushmore season level of historically great? I think you could start to talk about that.
What he's done as a 49er, I mean, just prior to the 49ers, I'm not sure I heard just Trent Williams best offensive tackle in the NFL. Like obviously he was terrific. He was great. We always knew like Trent Williams, that's a big dog out there, left tackle. Like he's one of the top. But I feel like once he got with the 49ers, it was almost like, oh, without a doubt. Now there's Eagle fans that would argue Lane Johnson, but for the rest of the world, there's Trent Williams, best offensive tackle in the entire NFL for essentially the entire stretch of him being the 49 on the 49ers, except for maybe like the last year. So from was it 2000, I believe that he got with the 49ers, year 2000? Was it the COVID year?
2020?
It had to be 20, right?
Yeah, it was after. Yeah, because it was
I
after
believe
the
it was the
Super
COVID
Bowl
season.
when. Yeah, after the Super Bowl season, that off season. So 2020.
20. So 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And I would maybe take away 24, but for those 4 years, best offensive tackle in the league.
Yeah.
Best offensive lineman in the league. That has to stand for something. When you are considered like without a doubt, universally known, I am the best at my position at one of the most important positions at that, right? Because there's Fred Warner, who last couple of years, best linebacker in the league. But does that hold more weight than being the best left tackle? And it's like, no, it doesn't.
If we're talking about singular seasons, what about Frank Gore's 2006, 1,695 rushing yards?
Yeah, I think the only knock against anything that he did, especially early, is just the teams were so bad.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, you were great. You were amazing. But man, like the team was so bad that that's always gonna just get overlooked by any other season where somebody had a terrific season and there was just much more importance because you made a deep postseason run.
And again, the no rings part is the biggest part of, there might be some people who are younger than us, Croc, and they grew up watching those teams, and their favorite teams were the Harbaugh era 49ers, and watching Frank Gore and watching Patrick Willis, and they're probably screaming at us right now because we haven't given enough credit for those guys. And Frank Gore, I mean, an all-time, obviously Niners all-time leading rusher, top 3 all-time leading rusher in NFL history, right? And we didn't even consider that, right? He wasn't even close to me being like, maybe you probably have to take somebody off and put Frank Gore on. And Frank Gore's awesome. But that's what we're talking about with this 49ers history. And in the end, it's rings. And you talked about like guys on the 49ers Mount Rushmore being on other teams' Mount Rushmores. Even if you look at the guys with the weakest candidacy that are on ours. So you got Steve Young. Steve Young is a Hall of Fame quarterback with a Super Bowl ring. He's on
league MVP twice.
Yeah, he's on 30 of 32 Mount Rushmores in the NFL, right? Like most teams don't have that alone, and he's one of the weaker candidates for the 49ers. 4 slots on their Mount Rushmore.
Terrell Owens is widely considered 2 or 3, however you want to do it, but
Yeah,
best receiver ever.
right.
So it's Jerry Rice. Essentially, everything that I'm seeing, what I hear, what I believe. All right, you got Jerry Rice, and then however you want to do Terrell Owens and Randy Moss, right? But like that's a top 3. Think about all the pass catchers ever in the world that ever stepped foot in the NFL, and Terrell Owens is considered a top 3 receiver, and we did not consider him at all.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's a rich history, and for it to be that easy for us to come up with our 4 and have the exact same 4 is pretty telling about how great those guys were, and also the impact of rings, which is something I think we got to talk about next, Croc, when we talk about current 49ers, who could potentially even get in that conversation of current San Francisco 49ers to be considered for the 49ers all-time Mount Rushmore. I want to talk about a few names from the past because the 49ers have a lot of Hall of Famers, and a lot of them that did a lot of big things pre-Bill Walsh era San Francisco 49ers, guys that we maybe didn't watch, but that deserve a mention here in today's episode. Next. So just going back to past eras of 49ers football. And man, the 49ers have a lot of players that I believe they have 29 players that have played for the Niners. Like not all of them. Like for example, O.J. Simpson, Hall of Famer, right? He didn't become a Hall of Famer as a San Francisco 49er, but there were some great running backs. There was the $1 million backfield way back in the day. We're talking like 1950s, 1960s era San Francisco 49ers. And you've got Joe Perry, and you've got Hugh McElhaney and John Henry Johnson, all Hall of Fame running backs for the San Francisco 49ers. Leo Namalini was like the original great San Francisco 49er. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1969. Obviously, a player that we didn't really watch. And even when you get a chance to see him, it's, this grainy footage. Bob St. Clair, similarly, guy that played in the 50s and the early 60s for the San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy Johnson, who was once the greatest corner, and he was the Deion Sanders of his era. He is a Hall of Famer. So, I mean, there's so many past greats, Fred Dean, that deserve some consideration here that were, Charles Haley's another one, man. He would be right there. And potentially even, right there with Gore, Patrick Willis, Terrell Owens, Charles Haley, Bryant Young in that conversation for one of the last spots. And again, those guys would all be on a lot of other teams' Mount Rushmores. So just a rich history for the San Francisco 49ers.
It definitely is. You ended the last segment talking about Super Bowls and how much they weigh in this conversation. And I got to thinking, right, when you are talking about the greatest, because at the top, everybody has stats, everybody's viewed a certain way. There has to be that thing that kind of differentiates these guys from these guys. And I think probably that's universal in every sport except for maybe baseball. Like just Barry Bonds, who doesn't have a ring, he is the greatest ever. And so he is an outlier, and that's because he was just so amazing. I say that while having a Giants shirt on. So maybe I'm a little biased in that conversation. The most dominant player I've ever seen in my life. But I was gonna say Joe Montana. Dan Marino. Like Dan Marino, how great of a quarterback was he? Like how prolific, how much ahead of his time. I want to say his second year ever, he threw like 50 touchdowns. Like Dan Marino was amazing. And anytime the top quarterbacks come up, he is never discussed because he doesn't have the rings. And that's essentially, even though it's a lot of it is the team element to winning it. And he went to a Super Bowl, obviously, but he's never discussed at all. And so it's like that the championship part does kind of differentiate things in this conversation. So when we're going to talk about guys like, George Kittle, who should get on there, are there people that are going to hold Brent Jones higher, even though Brent Jones has nowhere near the stats in different eras and different times, different kind of offenses, but maybe just importance of what he was during that time on those teams compared to George Kittle and what he is, which he's been the face of the 49ers for I don't know how many years now. But you don't have the rings, but you do have the stats. Are people, and his best season, and this is part of the conversation too, his best season was a season where they won like 6 games. And it's like, well, I had 1,350 yards. I broke a tight end record ever. But it's like, yeah, but you guys sucked. So are there people that are going to hold that against Kittle, or are they going to say, no, it's just so clear that even though he doesn't have the rings, just the numbers, what he means to the 49ers is far greater than anything Brent Jones was.
George Kittle, and we brought it up after the season last year, George Kittle is number 3 all time in 49ers franchise receiving yards. And he's going to pass, as long as he's healthy, he will pass. Well, maybe not will. He's 1,200 yards still behind, but he's going to pass Terrell Owens either this year or next year, right? To be number 2. And he'll never catch Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice has double Terrell Owens, more than double Terrell. He's got 11,000 more receiving yards as a 49er than Terrell Owens does at number 1. So nobody's ever going to catch Jerry Rice. A lot of records he put out there. But George Kittle is going to end his career unless something catastrophic happens. And he just got signed his new extension, right? George Kittle's going to be the number 2 all-time receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. So it's rings. It's all about the rings. And I think if it's not just about ring. I think it's about rings plural. That's where this group is lacking if you want to try to project that. And George Kittle, I think, could potentially. You want to talk about George Kittle, second leading all-time receiver? What if the 49ers win 2 Super Bowls over the course of the next 4 years? And he ends up being a 10,000 receiving yard guy for the San Francisco 49ers career. I think we'd start talking a lot differently about some of the guys in the current group. And I love that you brought up Dan Marino. We talked about this on the Peacock and Williamson show recently. Like Joe Burrow was our sort of comp for Dan Marino. Remember Joe Burrow early in his career? He's in a Super Bowl. They didn't win. Dan Marino, that season you're talking about, the Niners beat young Dan Marino his second year. The Dolphins fans are like, oh, well, we'll get back there and we'll win a Super Bowl. Nope, didn't happen. You hope that doesn't happen to Joe Burrow. And the way they're building that team, it's like, okay, having a lot of fun on offense, chucking a lot of touchdowns, but you got to have some defense there too. And you got to be able to if you want to win a championship. And
real quick parallels too with those squads. It was a long time ago, but I got to watch Dan Marino, OJ McDuffie.
Yeah. OJ
and
McDuffie.
Fryer.
Irving Fryer. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
Clinton and Duper for a long time.
But there were some receivers. Like I'm just saying, like that they kind of similar to the Bengals who are building there's just this receiving core around the quarterback. And the Miami Dolphins did that back in the day, and it just didn't quite work out that well. It turns out you need a little bit more than just a couple of receivers and a great quarterback.
No doubt. And then the other thing you start to look at is you start to draw those parallels with the 49ers. Brock Purdy and the Niners got to a Super Bowl early in Brock Purdy's career. Now he's expensive. You see a lot of that core group start to get a little older, a little bit more injured. And you start to look at this team. It's like, okay, you got to get back there. And you worry that there is a possibility that the 49ers path and Brock Purdy's path starts to look more like that, where it's like, gosh, we put together a good team, but it's never going to be as good as 2023. And you always think, oh, we'll get back there and we'll win it. A lot of teams don't get back there and don't win it. And that's the difference we're talking about. And when you're talking about the San Francisco 49ers organization, it's rings. If you want to be even in the conversation to be on Mount Rushmore and knock off Ronnie Lott, knock off Steve Young, MVPs, Super Bowl rings, that has to be part of the equation, or you just don't get consideration, period. Your resume is denied immediately.
I can only imagine someone that's maybe in their early 60s right now, right? So they're super locked in on the current, but they're also very locked in and grew up with the past. And they're like, what are you guys talking about? Like there is no conversation with any of these guys that you're talking about. And they may rattle off some of the guys who maybe had similar importance during those times as some of the guys that we're seeing now, right? Like Fred Warner, just how great Fred Warner is. And I bet they may throw a name out there for someone who they feel like Keenan Turner, right? A name that probably just wouldn't come up. But hey, man, Keenan Turner was this terrific linebacker for the 49ers during that time. And they're like, well, he meant just as much for the Niners during that time, but maybe it was overshadowed by so much greatness as Fred Warner does to these current 49ers.
Yeah, Dwight Clark's a name we haven't really brought up. He's a player that George Kittle just passed on the all-time 49ers receiving list. Also has a ring.
Also as a receiver, which I found out like a few years ago. The whole time I just thought he was a tight end.
He seems like a tight end. Yeah, he would have been converted to tight end in this era immediately. But yeah, he was. They used to have a lot more.
Travis Kelce.
Past NFL was so strange how they used to just drop back these big. Speaking of Dan Marino, go watch some Dan Marino. He's like on his tippy toes. Seems like he drops back 20 yards. He's like 7-step drops, dropping way back, and just chucking it down the field. There was none of this. Oh, it's out quick. Here we go. Bleep, bleep, bleep. And really the Bill Walsh offense and that West Coast offense started throwing a little bit more timing stuff and slants in the shorter stuff. But even now, still with all the screens and everything that's moving around, like you go watch those teams, they were dropping back and they were chucking it down the football field
from under center. Like yes. Remember, Steve Young famously has never taken a snap from shotgun.
That's insane. That is insane. Is George Kittle the most likely? Like, let's say the 49ers wins a Super Bowl or two. Would it be George Kittle? Just because of what how his stats kind of stack up all time Fred Warner, I think, would be probably pretty close, but is there even a path for Fred Warner to be so great that you would put him, over Ronnie Lott or over Patrick Willis even for consideration? Or would he just kind of be on that same Patrick Willis plan, partially just because he's a linebacker? I think Nick Bosa, you would have to have a pretty amazing, and he started off, and he's got a defensive player of the year. So if you're talking about maybe some rings, and you start talking about him in the same light that maybe Packers fans talk about, Reggie White or whoever. He wasn't quite that dominant in his prime, but he's got a path if the Niners start winning a lot, and he's still young, and you could start collecting a lot of career accolades.
I think for Fred Warner to pass Patrick Willis, he'd have to win a ring, a ring or defensive player of the year, because that's the one thing that eluded Patrick Willis. But just with how great he was during that time, he didn't play a whole lot of years, but I want to say 6 All-Pros in 8 years. And like right away, it's like first team All-Pro, first team All-Pro, first team All-Pro. Like there's just all these first team All-Pros that he had. So, for Fred Warner, who right now he's stringing those All-Pros together, I feel like there would just have to be that other thing that puts him over Patrick Willis, because I think just the way our brains work, as great as we believe Fred Warner is, and we may say, oh, better coverage guy and all that, but he's just not better than Patrick Willis.
Mm-hmm. Not yet.
So it would have to be like, well, I was so great this season, I won Defensive Player of the Year. Patrick Willis never did that. And then it's like, all right, you can go in over.
Yeah. And for anybody arguing anybody of the current group and what they could become, it's very simple, short answer. The standard is the standard. It's been set. Win a ring, and then we'll talk, and maybe win a couple of rings, and we'll really talk, right? That's where we are. San Francisco 49ers. That's why we have so many listeners daily here, Croc, at Locked On 49ers. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Let us know what you think. Who's on your Mount Rushmore? Who could be potentially?
Didn't even mention Roger Craig, the first 1,000 guy. Just too rich of a history.
Yeah, he doesn't even get Hall of Fame consideration. The OG 1K guy. He's just criminally underrated. So I'm glad you brought him up. Absolutely. Kyle Shanahan, though, I think already would be on the Mount Rushmore of 49ers head coaches. You'd have to start with Walsh and Seifert. Seifert's got a better record than Walsh, actually, but I think we credit a lot of Seifert with being able to carry over what was already set with Walsh. Kyle Shanahan would be on that list, I would think, over Harbaugh. They both.
What is it about Harbaugh? I know we were supposed to be getting out of here. You already started the exit, but Harbaugh has done something to 49er fans' brains where we just hold him on just this really high pedestal, me included, because when you mentioned Harbaugh, you mentioned over Harbaugh, my initial reaction was to push back, even though they've done like the same thing.
It was, they've done a lot of the similar stuff. Harbaugh had a better team to start. I think that's probably what it is, because Harbaugh came in with the same group of guys and was like, we've got star players here, and we're immediately awesome. It took a little bit longer with Kyle Shanahan. And really, there was just the one bad year at the end. But it was so great for such a short amount of time. There wasn't a lot of time for be like, oh, we kind of had some dips and got better and then got worse and had some bad seasons. It was just awesome until it ended, essentially, with the Harbaugh era.
It's wild that it was only 4 seasons. It was just the 3 conference championship games plus a Super Bowl appearance, and then the 8-8 season, and poof, he was in Michigan. like that's it, But the way he's viewed, at least in my head, when you said his name, my initial reaction was, no, there's no way you put Shanahan over Harbaugh. So I guess that's a great question for the fan base. Why do we hold, well, I don't want to put, all of you guys, I'm assuming everybody's thinking like me, we hold him to just this higher standard, not even higher standard, excuse me. We hold him on a higher pedestal than we do Kyle Shanahan, who had a much tougher job. And maybe part of that is something to this as well. It's kind of the Brock Purdy thing. Maybe you make the difficult look easy, and then people knock you for that. But we talk about and he did have some terrific players on that team, but nobody wanted Alex Smith. I don't even think he wanted Alex Smith. And it was just a lockout season. So it's like, well, we kind of got to keep this guy around. So let's just keep Alex Smith for this year. But was that the case with a lot of those players? And we just view it as, oh, he just came into this great situation and rattled off 13-win seasons. and multiple conference championship appearances when maybe they weren't that great, but he was just that good of a head coach. I don't know. There's a conversation to be had about that.
Let us know what you think on YouTube, and make sure you subscribed up there and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Back tomorrow, Winky Wednesday, right here, Locked On 49ers.